Every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, we have a show that all of us that you see here today do together, except Joshua, who's here, who's with us sometimes. Joshua is our special guest Cleon today. And what we do every week, we have it, put it up on YouTube. It's a live show. We put it on our podcast called Legaltech Week. And we just kind of talk loosely, generally, with a little fun about the week's top stories in legal tech, legal innovation, law practice. And so last year, when we were here at this show, Pamela Smith, the head of communications here at Clio, had the brilliant idea, I thought, of getting us all together up here on stage.
It seemed brilliant at the time. It seemed brilliant at the time.
It seemed brilliant at the time, yeah. Well, everything seems brilliant at the time. To try and get us all together up here to do a live version of it. So this is a little bit of experiment for us. We hope it's going to be fun. But what we're going to do is a little bit different, because usually every week we talk about the week's top stories. Today what we're going to do is take a little bit different approach and talk about some of what have been the big themes that everybody's been talking about this year. You might hear about AI, for example, and kind of have a little bit of a debate, a little bit of a discussion as to whether people agree or disagree in terms of whether these are important trends or not, or what the trends look like. Before we do any of that, we're going to kind of very quickly run through and have everybody give a quick 2-second introduction of who they are, so you can put names with faces, and then we'll get going. So, Steve, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. I'm Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal.
My name is Nikki Black. I'm the Principal Legal Insight Strategist for My Case in Law Pay, and I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, and the Daily Record.
Joshua Lennon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio.
I'm Stephanie Wilkins. As of 3 days ago, I am the Director of Content at Legal Tech Hub.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law.
Caroline Hill from Legal IT Insider.
And I'm Bob Ambrogi, and I write a blog called Law Sites, and I have a podcast called Law Next besides this one. By the way, if you are ever interested in watching our Friday show, or if you want to see the recording of this show, it's all up on YouTube at YouTube/LegalTechWeek. And also there you can find the information on how to sign up for our weekly show or listen to the podcast or whatever else you want to do. So there have been a lot of really big, important issues this year in the world of legal tech. And we want to really talk about a number of them today. But I think one of the most pressing issues that we want to try and get to today is this. And we're going to call it beard or no beard. Now, if any of you have been to ClioCon before, you may have noticed a difference this year. Jack Newton's sporting a beard. He just grew it, I think, pretty recently. And what we want to know is, does it stay or does it go? Anybody have an opinion on that?
I stay.
Stay.
I'm on Team Beard.
Yeah.
I've been Team Beard from the beginning.
I like the beard.
Pro beard.
That wasn't a debate. We're beard.
Yeah, I think we're all beard.
We're all
Great, now
pro-beard.
I have to argue against it, and he's my boss.
So that's what you get for joining the panel.
He shouldn't have a beard. I mean, look at that first picture, right? Where he looks thoughtful, energetic. The second picture, hirsute is maybe the best word. Yeah. So I predict the beard is temporary.
He's got the Uncle Phil vibe in the second one a little bit.
Yeah,
I think
right.
it gives him the tech founder vibe, though. I like the beard. I don't know.
I think it's flattering.
I feel like it goes with the whole hockey vibe, too.
Yeah, it's a playoff beard.
It's a playoff beard, is that?
Yeah.
Playoff beard. Is everybody familiar with that tradition? Your team makes the playoff, you don't shave for the whole month and a half of the playoffs.
As long as they're still in it.
As long as they're still winning, yeah. It's why Canadian men tend to look shaggy. Yeah.
All right.
All right, well, that's it. I guess beard wins. And if I can get this off. No, I can't get it off. There it goes.
He's just
We're
going to
going to
be
be
there
stuck
the
with
whole time.
Jack's beard for the rest of the show. That's it for the slideshow. So obviously there's been no bigger story in legal tech this year than that of generative AI.
Wait, what?
Joe's not always paying attention to what's going on, so we did have to tell him about this. And one of the biggest questions I think that we've all been talking about, this was even talked about in the Legal Trends report that came out, is this question of to what extent generative AI is going to replace the work that lawyers do, or whether it is even going to eventually entirely replace the work that lawyers do. So we are going to put forward a proposition here and then talk about a little bit about it, that within 10 years, generative AI is going to replace at least half of what legal professionals and what lawyers do. So, Nikki, do you buy that? Do you agree with that?
I disagree, and the reason I disagree is because I think it's one of those, it depends on what lawyer and what type of legal professional you're talking about, partly. I think it's going to replace what a lot of associates do and paralegals do, and certainly some aspects of what lawyers higher up the food chain do. But I also think that it's really difficult to predict 50%. You know, is it going to be 50% in 10 years? I think it's too early to make those kind of predictions, so I disagree.
And I'm going to agree. Yeah. If you looked at this year's Legal Trends report, we actually did something very interesting. We took 7 million anonymized aggregated time entries. We classified them against ONET's workplace classification work activities, and then rated those for automation. And what they found is for lawyers, 57% of billable time entries could be replaced by automation. And that's a huge number. And that's now, with AI as it is now. For paralegals, they were estimating 76%. For legal secretaries, 81%. And so our research is showing that there's this really huge potential for AI to reduce billable hours. The one thing I do want to point out is that while it was over 50%, no work activity was ever 100% replaced. So we're not replacing people, but we're definitely reducing the number of hours it takes to get the same type of output.
So just keeping with the beer discussion, we're kind of splitting hairs on this issue, or what?
Nice.
Bad pun. This is what you should expect in the weekly panel.
We love a pun.
It just seems like part of the problem is nobody wants to admit it because lawyers have a finely honed sense of self-importance. But nobody wants to admit it, but so much of what lawyers do is useless, horrible stuff. So when we say 50% of the work, it's not like all the thinking stuff, it's the time that you're sitting there digging through, like reading a bunch of stuff from the DMS to find like the bit that you want to, like all of that kind of, those horrible tasks are the parts that get taken away. So when we say 50%, everybody thinks it's never going to replace 50% of my mega smart super brain, but like it's not doing that, but it's replacing all the terrible stuff that you did.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think what you're referring to is not the work, but the billable hours. 50% of the billable hours.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that those billable hours are hours that lawyers should have been doing in the first place, because a lot of them probably aren't.
And
Or the
replace suggests
non-billable
some
hours. I mean, there's so much work that you lawyers do that doesn't get to be billed or gets written off, and that's a good 50% of the day. I mean, if we're talking on average, maybe not for every single lawyer, but so taking that part away, I 100% agree that it will do that.
And replace suggests going from something to nothing, when actually, if it takes away the routine stuff that can be automated, then you can do more of the high-level advisory. So actually, I think it's kind of misleading to suggest that it will replace, or to suggest that there'll be kind of like none of that work available. Actually, it will just mean that people were doing more of the high-level strategic stuff, and they'll have more time to do that. There's a sort of a large unmet need in the marketplace, and perhaps we'll be able to start meeting some of that need.
Yeah.
It's tasks, not jobs.
I also think, just to be fair, you know, the idea that it's not going to replace lawyers, or it's going to make it so you need to hire less lawyers. So I think it's going to change what the practice of law starts to look like over time, because lawyers are going to be able to do more impactful stuff, and a lot of this other stuff's going to be automated. So it's absolutely going to change the practice of law.
I think it'll change the leverage model pretty substantially, and that's important because a lot of money has been made by law firms using the leverage model, where you have one partner and 6 associates. Now you might have one partner and 1 associate and get the same, if not more, work done.
Steve, you made the comment that it won't replace the work so much as it will replace the billable hours, and I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think a lot of what generative AI is going to do is actually replace the work that lawyers are doing. Generating contracts. I mean, how much time do lawyers now spend generating contracts, and how much are they going to be spending doing that in a year, let alone 5 years or 10 years down the road?
And I guess I would respond by saying that when you're talking about generate contracts, how much of the generation has to be done or should be done by the lawyer versus how much just review of what has been generated through some other
Yeah, you go in
means.
your DMS and grab something you did 10 years ago and say, call it good, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you're not really writing them from scratch. Or you shouldn't be, probably.
You're not suggesting we need to review the work of AI, are you?
No, it's all good.
It's good.
Good. Got me worried there for a minute. Well, it's kind of related to this. Is another topic that again Jack touched on in his keynote yesterday that you touched on in the Legal Trends report, which is that I can tell you that for as long as I have been a lawyer, which is probably longer than most anybody in this room.
Careful.
I have been hearing, except Steve, I have been hearing talk of the death of the billable hour. This has been a theme that just keeps coming and coming and coming, and yet it seems to be alive and well and perfectly healthy. But there are now a lot of people who are saying that generative AI is finally going to be the death knell of the billable hour, and that it's almost inevitable that that's going to happen. Jack put up that big slide yesterday with a little gravestone, RIP the billable hour.
Yeah.
What do we think?
Yeah, I understand the skepticism because, yeah, it's been looming for a while. But I do think that there's something about AI, there are a couple things about AI that I think push us closer to the demise of it as the primary model for how legal works. One of which, obviously, is speed and efficiency, like being able to get things done. You aren't on a wild goose chase through your DMS and Edgar to find like the models that you want. Like it's going to find things faster. And the faster and more predictable the work is, the easier it is to slap a flat fee on it, right? The reason you have a lot of apprehension about flat fees is I don't know what this is going to take. It makes it a lot easier to predict. But the biggest reason, I think, is regulatory. Ultimately, the billable hour is getting replaced, like we were talking about before, because a lot of the work you aren't going to be able to bill for because you're moving so much faster. And then when you don't have those billable hours to get paid on, what are you going to do? Regulation-wise, you can't bill you can't bill 5 hours for having only done 2 hours of work because, I mean, you could, you'd be in trouble, but you can't do that. So how do you get money if you're utilizing AI in this way to make it faster and more efficient? And the easy way to do that is have a flat fee that takes that stuff into account. And so the only way you're going to recapture the money you're losing by the billable hour going down is going to be through flat fees. And I think that's the real reason it's going to be, cynically, that's the real reason it's going to take over.
Stephanie, what do you think?
Disagree. I mean, the billable hour is like a cockroach. Nothing's ever going to kill that thing. I mean, I was a big law associate. I would love to see it go on as much as anybody else, but the reality is it's not going away. I feel like generative AI has wounded it much more than other technology has in the past, and so you're going to see a lot of the work that can be commoditizable will be done by AI, and that won't be billed for anymore, but there's always going to be the higher level work that for now is still going to be billed out. And I also think it's important that we're only talking about the billing side of it. The billable hour model is so ingrained into all other aspects of the business model. Like the compensation structures are going to have to change, because even when you're billing on a flat fee, associates are still tracking their hours to hit their targets, to get their bonuses. Like it is so much more ingrained than just how you're billing clients that to truly kill it and eradicate it, we have to go so much farther.
And that's not to mention the fact that many of the in-house counsel came from law firms, and that's how they're accustomed to valuing services, is by the billable hour. I think it
Of course,
actually...
they left law firms so they wouldn't have to bill their own time.
Right.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of it, we have to remember that the law firm market is so segmented that to talk about it just in general is difficult. Large firms, ingrained culture, corporate clients, slow to change. Some of the smaller firms are more nimble, have different client mixes, many more individuals, smaller businesses, much easier to change and move to a flat fee. And those clients really want flat fees, I think.
Well, and that's kind of the thing. If you're losing hours because you're moving faster, one of two things is going to happen. Either you exist in a space where you can now replace that lost time with more clients and more matters that you otherwise were turning away. I don't think every lawyer in the world is in that position. So given that you aren't in that position, you're going to have fewer things to bill. And what are you going to do there? And how do you recapture that?
But even
I just
now
think
when
the
people are... Oh, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah.
I just think the inertia is too much at the end of the day for the billable hour, because look, like Stephanie was saying, it's ingrained into everything that they do. And yeah, there was a way to do it before the billable hour came about, but the billable hour has been here for so long, and we've been predicting the demise of it for decades now. I mean, the Great Recession is going to end it because people can't afford to just run the bills anymore, or this is going to end it, or this is going to, or so it's just. Like, I think it's one of those things where it's like we want it to go away because we see sort of like the absurdity of it, but on the other hand, there is a reason for it as why, and some clients even like it because they like the predictability, they like the certainty of it, and until they figure out a way to come up with an alternative fee that has that kind of certainty, they're not going to be willing to just wholesale replace what they've done for like decades. So. Yeah, you have to be careful when when we make these predictions because AI looks like it could completely upend the model, and I think we all are kind of hoping that. But look, it's outlasted a lot of other things.
You just described the billable hour as predictable, though, which is not, I think, what most clients tend to associate with it. They view it as unpredictable. So I'm going to start with like $340 an hour, but then it just keeps growing, and I don't know where it ends. And I think one of the more difficult aspects of generative AI in this discussion is it's so readily accessible to clients and judges and other people who have an input on the fee structure itself, right? So they're going to go to ChatGPT and write me a divorce separation agreement, and it's going to be garbage, but they're going to think it's okay and then wonder why you're charging them thousands of dollars in this unpredictable amount. And we're seeing judges make that same kind of mistaken attitudes. There are attorney fee disputes where the judges are writing down fees saying an AI could have done this. And it's questionable whether the AI could have, but you go, yes, judge, and accept the lesser fee. And so as we talk about what law firms are going to have to do to change, I don't think we can discount that outward pressure. And the uninformed attitudes of what they expect for their money.
Lawyers love it, clients hate it.
Yeah.
Another factor that no one's touched on yet is, in addition to creating efficiency that's going to make it easier to bill flat fees and clients expecting that, once it's baked into, and this is a concept that's come up repeatedly, Jack mentioned it during his keynote, once it's baked into the software that your firm's using, the practice management software, where there's billing data, another thing that it's going to help you do is come up with flat fees that are both competitive and profitable, because you can use the generative AI to query your firm's database to understand how these types of cases have been resolved in the past, how long it took, at what stage did they resolve at, how much money did you make, what were you charging, and then help you actually determine a flat fee that will be competitive and profitable. So that's another way I think where you're going to see generative AI helping sort of lead us in that direction, in addition to all those other pressures that we've been talking about.
But when people start dipping their toe in this pool of fixed fees or flat fees, how do they start? They sit down and say, normally this would take me this amount of money at this amount of thing. They start with the billable hour. Sorry, I'm losing my microphone. I hope you can hear me. Mm-hmm. They start with the billable hour, and so really, at least in the early days, I really believe that a lot of these fixed fees are just a billable hour dressed up in a fancy outfit.
Right.
I think there's a lot of sense in having a fixed fee from a law firm perspective, where you are definitely doing something faster. We've talked about the fact that you can't charge for 3 hours when you've done something in 1 hour, but actually the value represented to the client is significant. So that makes sense for the law firm to move to a flat fee. I think that we're going to see a lot of things change. I think that clients will start to potentially do more in-house, but I do think that from the law firms that I speak to, clients, even where the law firm goes to the client and tries to charge in a different way, quite often the client will push back. And in fact, there's a lot of the argument around will we see change comes from this idea that the client will be driving change. Mm-hmm. There may be some parts of it where they are driving change, but what will probably mean is they'll do some more in-house, and then for the work that they go to the law firm, they'll probably still think in terms of the billable hour, because that is really the way that they understand value. Right. And I don't see that changing for the segment that they go to law firms. I think that it will continue to be measured in that way.
I think that it's key to remember, it's key to make the distinction between the billable hour and the hour. Timekeeping is definitely not going away because it is critical to how you manage resources, and that goes beyond law, but definitely within law. But whether or not you then translate those hours you've collected into a dollar amount, that's I think, a distinction. Because I agree with you completely that if I'm managing a firm, I want to know how long everything takes, because that's how I'm going to figure out whether I'm going to, what my flat fee structure is going to be.
Josh and I had an interesting conversation before, and I think, Josh, you can speak for himself, but I think you're correct with the idea that there's going to be a hybrid approach to this. So certain things, I come from a litigation background, there's a lot of things that you do in a litigation case that are very predictable from a time perspective. They don't change much case to case. A lot of that can be done on a flat fee basis, but when you actually get into a trial of a case, then it becomes much more unpredictable, and you don't really know how to set up a flat fee, at least in many cases. Some you do, but in many cases you don't. So, we may end up with a more hybrid kind of approach to billing that we haven't seen before.
And one of the things that I think is interesting about that is it gives law firms predictability, right? If we're billing hourly and the case settles after discovery, right, we might have lost a bunch of hours that would have been nice to have. But if we have a flat fee that goes through discovery, then both the client and the law firm has a certainty. This is what this portion is going to cost us. And yeah, if we settle early, great. I'm still keeping my fee. That's what we agreed on.
No, but the client doesn't agree with that part.
Well, that's where we use AI to write a really strong argument for why you should keep your fee. But then if you go to trial, yeah, we might switch to hourly because we bring in all these additional stakeholders. They're unpredictable, and that cost certainty needs to be shared. And the billable hour is one way we kind of share that risk. But yeah, I think hybrid billing is going to become more and more common in more practice areas than ever before.
And I absolutely agree with that. I just still don't see that as the death of the billable hours. So maybe.
I agree with you with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Jack threw that slide up there, I was like, oh. That and the beard. No.
Yeah. All right. Well, all this agreement, then we better stop here on this issue. Because, one of the other. I think a lot of lawyers, perhaps dream of someday being written up in the New York Times and getting a lot of exposure for work they've done. But for one particular lawyer named Stephen Schwartz, it might have been a bit of a hair-raising moment, I think, when he got written up in the New York Times for and many other major legal publications and national news publications and legal publications. When he got written up for filing brief in court that contained a whole bunch of entirely made-up citations and cases. And of course, we probably all heard about the Avianca case and poor Stephen Schwartz. You would have thought that with all the attention paid to that case and all the attention paid to the fact that, yes, in fact, AI can hallucinate and make things up, that lawyers would have learned their lesson. And yet, it seemed that was just the first of a cascade of cases we kept hearing about over the last year and a half or so of lawyers not understanding how AI works and not understanding their duty to review the work that this puts out before they go file it with a court. So I guess the proposition is that, okay, now at this point, finally they have learned their lesson, and we're not going to continue to see lawyers screwing up AI technology in the future. Caroline, you agree with that, right?
I actually do.
Yeah.
Is that my position? I actually think that lawyers, well, for the purpose of this debate, that lawyers will learn because, so I'm agreeing, and I want to take you back many, many years ago. I can't see because of the bright light, so I'm not quite sure of the age of people in the room, to the start of email, right? To when we had this brand new means of communicating. And what did we all use email to circulate? Well, I probably shouldn't say on the stage, but really inappropriate images. And when I started at a law firm that probably should remain nameless, just before I started, there was this crisis where this email had gone viral that was deeply inappropriate. Clients were calling. I couldn't even get through to reception because it was blowing up. Because I wish I could tell you the details. It was very bad. And it was reputationally disastrous. And this was something that happened all the time in law firms, right? Emails were used for deeply inappropriate communication. as people got used to this new way of communicating. Okay, email, it's a different type of technology, but it was completely radical. We went from one way of doing something to a completely different way of doing something, much in the way that we're doing now. And with serious ramifications. And what's happened over time, okay, there's still mess ups, people still share things with people they shouldn't, but what's happening now is it's happening less, right? We are much more aware of what we can and can't do. We've had training, we've learned through other people's mistakes. We don't want to be in that position, right? We don't want the humiliation. And one good thing about Stephen Schwartz is that everybody goes, I'm really glad that wasn't me, right? And that will perpetuate. There'll still be mistakes. But also there'll probably be new technologies, much in the same way that when email, now you can have technology that will help you to query whether you sent it to the wrong person, for example. They say, did you really mean to send it to Joe Smith? Oh, no, I didn't, right? And we'll have ways, there'll be technologies that evolve as we learn that will help to educate and that will help us to prevent making mistakes. So therefore, I agree that we're going to get better.
There you go. Joshua, what do you say?
I'm going to disagree, right? We all know somebody who has hit reply all and they shouldn't have. Decades after Caroline's example, right? And so there will always be someone who either just doesn't get it, right? Or just refuses to take the time to learn. And they're going to have it come and bite them. And it's not just email and AI technology. There are stories like all the time in your guys' coverage about somebody was on their cell phone on the train talking about confidential case and who was in the seat behind them but opposing counsel. Right. Or somebody sent a really inappropriate demand letter and Joe's going to put it up on Above the Law like as soon as he gets his hands on it, right? As well as whatever pithy reply comes with it. Yeah, somebody's signing your name to, these letters, and it wasn't someone. It was some
inappropriate letters are my favorite.
Yeah, right. And so there's always going to be a class of lawyer that is just not going to get it. And lawyers are amazing people, but they're people. And so that's what's going to happen. What I think is going to be different is we're no longer going to excuse the lawyer to a degree because it's a new technology, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe your lawyer got a little bit of leeway because, hey, email's new, right? But now everybody's like, you should know. Reply all is a bad idea. Don't send inappropriate messages. But we still see inappropriate messages in email, text messages, Slack channels, right? It's going to happen. The question is, who do we hold responsible, the tool or the person? That's what I think is going to change.
Yeah,
well, I think, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I hated the coverage of this case when it happened because they tried so hard, because mainstream journalism, they tried so hard to make this a technology issue, and I just fundamentally don't think it was. Like, they were a bunch of made-up cases that the person didn't bother to read. If they got a bunch of red-flagged cases off of Westlaw and put them up there without having read them, same problem would have happened. So it's not a technology problem. Because I don't think it's a technology problem, I'm kind of agreeing with Joshua here that, like, lawyers are just, there's bunches of lawyers who are stupid and don't understand how ethics works, and that's just the thing. And it has nothing to do with the technology. Technology is just a new way in which they can screw up.
Yeah, but it's like Jack said in his keynote. We now understand. We're starting to understand what we didn't. We thought about Wikipedia. We thought about Google. We thought we could just put a question in a box and that we would get something which was vaguely right. Like, we're told that Wikipedia isn't right, but most of the time it is right. And if it's not right to a degree. I think he used it as a pernicious, a sort of an assistant that lies to you, right? This is a new way of thinking that we haven't had our brains need to come round to that, and once they have, then we'll understand that this is not Google or Wikipedia.
The phrase, and I can't remember the woman who coined it, but the phrase you're looking for, like an assistant that lies to you, the phrase mansplaining as a service is what I've heard for GPT, which I think is pretty dead on. It is very confident and very wrong and very confident in its wrongness.
There's this magic AI factor here too, though, where like people are trusting it more just because of that, but conversely, they're also blaming it more. Where like when you had the I am not a cat lawyer on Zoom, nobody blames Zoom, they blame the lawyer. But suddenly when ChatGPT is the technology, they're like, well, the AI did it. And so, I think that's why people are going to, people, and you have people dabbling in it that were always afraid to touch technology in the past. Yeah. So I really do think we're going to see more.
I think there are a couple things. I think if you're a good lawyer, then you're fine. But if you're a bad lawyer, you're going to do bad things. And generative AI is just going to help you do those bad things, right? And so, so ultimately what happens is that, but I think the other thing to consider is that here in this conference, like we're all kind of savvy to these kind of things and we understand what the risks are. But for a lot of the general public, they think generative AI is gold. I mean, my aunt just like set up something like from a contract that she got off ChatGPT. And I was like, you probably shouldn't do that. You should go talk to a lawyer. She's like, why would I do that? I have ChatGPT. So, and she's not like, she's educated. She, has an advanced degree and whatnot. But I think for a lot of people, this tool is just so intuitive. It's so easy to use, and it's so thorough. I mean, well, depending on what you describe by that, but like they see it as okay. Well, this is gold. It's fine.
I think that what ChatGPT did, and these issues that occurred, it exposed the ugly underbelly of incompetence in the legal profession. In the past, when people would submit papers that had an incorrect citation, or the citation didn't make any sense, they'd give them the benefit of the doubt. Oh, they must have just not read this carefully, or they must have mistyped this. When instead, half the time what happened is they would take somebody else's in their office or something that they found online, and they would just copy and paste that memorandum and change the facts, or they would have an associate do the research and they wouldn't review the research. And so there was incompetency happening on a regular basis. People were just given the benefit of the doubt because the cases that were cited were actual cases, or it was just one, they just assumed the citation was somehow incorrect. But when the citation and the case names are completely made up, it is like they're caught. Like this is proof of incompetence. It's proof that they didn't read it. And so I think it's 100% a competency issue. It's a little bit different than the question we were initially that was posed to us. But this is, all these things that happen were 100% competency issues, not a technology issue. And part of your core competence is understanding the technology that you use. You have to make an educated decision and an informed decision whether to use it, and you have to understand how to use it when you're using this tech. So across the board, it's a competency issue.
I think there's also an increased recognition by law firms and in-house legal departments to be sure that their people understand these risks and benefits. I mean, it was highlighted in the ABA recent opinion. It talked about the supervisory responsibilities. When you think about it as a law firm manager, you do have supervisory responsibilities to make sure that everybody in the firm knows how to use these tools, knows how to use them correctly. And if that's engaged and employed, then the risk of somebody doing it poorly goes down. But I think, Victor, you're right. I mean, I think it's good lawyers, it's not a problem. It's always the bad lawyers who want to cut corners.
Like you said.
Are you suggesting
We've
training?
talked about this show a lot on our show. We've talked about this issue a lot on our show. And I think we all agree that this is really a competence issue and not a tech issue here.
Pity poor Stephen
I would go
Schwartz,
even
though,
farther and
right?
say it's a malpractice issue, really. I mean,
Yeah.
if you are filing briefs without even reading the case, let alone check the citation, you're not doing what you should be doing as a lawyer.
But like pity Stephen Schwartz though. Like this is what he's going to be known for the rest of his life.
Well,
Whereas
the
Michael
cat lawyer.
Cohen just missed getting this like by a couple of months, and I was going to be saying Michael Cohen.
He's the cat lawyer of the AI generation.
Well, in the sanctions hearing, the judge said your sanctions are so low because now everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
Right? He was covered so much. And so I know we keep saying the same name over and over again, but he was sanctioned.
They also made him reach out to every judge that he cited a fake case attributable to, which is a really unique kind of sanction that's not just money. Like, that's just sheer embarrassment.
Yeah.
Humiliation.
Humiliation works wonders, right?
It does.
So another type of story, genre of story in a sense, that's been in the news a lot this year in the legal tech world has been fundraisers and mergers and acquisitions. Clio itself was probably one of the biggest headlines of the year this year when it announced its financing round of $900 million, which was a record-setting round in the legal tech world and a record in a number of different ways. But one of the largest raise ever by a legal tech company in a single round. So I think one of the questions, and we on our show talk about these issues all the time. We're always talking about the latest M&As, the latest financings. We all write about these things. We cover them. But I guess what I wonder is, does this kind of news really matter to practicing lawyers out there in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, do they even need to know about this stuff, or is this just inside baseball that industry insiders are the only ones who need to care about it? So
no bias on this panel at all. A bunch of
no
industry
bias on this panel,
insiders.
but
Yeah.
Steve, you want to start us off on that, or do
Yeah,
you?
I don't think it matters much to the practicing lawyers. I mean, most of them are busy. They're servicing clients. They're putting out fires. There might be a blurb on the news that somebody had a huge investment, but I don't think that resonates with most lawyers. Perhaps it should, because it could impact how they do work. But as a practical matter, I don't think they care much. It's more news that relates to a business that's out there, just like a merger between Conoco and Marathon Oil. I mean, I guess that's kind of interesting, but I don't sit around and think about it very often. So I don't think that they care a whole lot about that kind of thing. It is all news to us. I mean, we care a lot about it, and that's what we do. We think about it, we talk about it.
Good content.
Yeah, if you took a poll, of a number of random lawyers, about the Clio and the investment in Clio, and did you hear of it? I think most of them go, unless maybe they're Clio users, they might be more inclined to think about it, but most of them would say, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Had many Clio lawyers who voiced thoughts on where that money should be invested. Yeah. Fix this, and this. Yeah.
There are views on the Roundtable about what you guys could do with some of that money as well.
You could sponsor this show, for instance.
But Stephanie, you devoted a lot of time and resources to covering this stuff over the past year. What do you think on that?
I feel like I'm in the minority on the other side of that, where I do think it matters. I mean, it may be true that people don't care, but they should. It does matter. It's more than just inside baseball. I mean, for one, it's an indicator of what's going on in the economy and where money is going and where money is being put in. But also, all lawyers are using technology, whether or not they think of themselves as technology users, they are right now. And so if you're using tools that are getting tons of money or being bought by a huge enterprise company that was now, they're buying Legaltech tools, it shows that you're making smart tech stack choices, and that the solutions you have are going to keep serving you going forward, as opposed to your favorite tool might be obsolete tomorrow, and if you're not keeping pace with whether or not it's one of the ones that is doing well in the industry, it's going to be a rude awakening when that happens. Or if it's a tiny point solution and it's not integrating with one of the bigger players, that's going to be a problem for you down the road. So it really, the kind of information, to me, is far more important than maybe some people are realizing.
Well, and I think it's important. It's part of your tech competency requirement, I would suggest. And I wrote a book on cloud computing that was published by the ABA in 2012, and in that book I had a list of 20 questions that and I've now added 2 more, but you need to ask cloud providers when you're vetting them and trying to understand how they're going to handle your data and who has access to it. And you also need to understand the company itself. You need to understand if they were recently acquired, if they recently received an investment round, because those things tell you a little bit about what's going to be happening and what's on the roadmap for the next 2 to 3 years. And it really is something that you need to know as part of your core competency of vetting the providers that you use, because they handle your firm's confidential client data. And so it's really part of that. And at this point, 99% of the stuff you're using is going to be in the cloud, especially if you're using AI. But so I think really it actually kind of falls under that. And it may not be that they need to constantly be understanding this, but they do need to, when they're choosing new providers, understand what's going on with that company, and then also, on about an annual basis, revisit those providers, give them a call, make sure nothing's changed since the last time that you vetted them. So I think in that context, it's important.
Yeah.
Could I raise a point? Bob on Law Sites actually did a really good 4-part series on practice management companies and how the industry has grown and how the industry has changed, and it's really enlightening. Everybody should go read it. From kind of our inside baseball point of view is we've seen law firms that have been impacted by this, where they were using a tool and suddenly they get the email that's like, bye, see ya, and they come to us like, what do we do? How do we get back up and running? It's like a migration, right? And so if they have the kind of reporting that we're seeing here and they pay attention to it, they're less likely to get disrupted that way. And I think that's the value of the people on this panel, is even if lawyers aren't paying attention, there's a group of people who are and a place where you can find that information.
Thanks for that plug. I got a check for you later, but
I'm doing
no. But I think it's actually really important though, because even in the law practice management space, what I think a lot of people don't realize is there's been this immense consolidation, so that there are basically 6 ownership groups that cover almost all of the major law practice management software out there right now. All dozens and dozens of different brands that you see out there, but you may not realize who ultimately owns, and it's usually some private equity group of some sort that owns it. So there's been a lot of consolidation, and you can debate whether that consolidation is a good thing or a bad thing. There's arguments on both sides, but I agree with Nikki that it's an ethical issue that lawyers basically know your company, know who owns your company, know is it a stable company that's going to be in business in 5 years, what are their financial situation. The duty of technology competence encompasses the obligation to vet your company, vet your vendors. Who owns your data? Who's controlling your data? Who's managing your data? It's really important stuff.
I would maybe push back a little bit on that, because it's not a question of should they, it's a question of whether they do. I mean, clearly they should keep up with it. I mean, we've all seen law firms that purchase a product and employ and engage it, and then something happens, companies merge or bought out, and the service and the product goes down, and that's the first indication. The lawyers that are using it saying, what the hell happened to this product? It used to be a good product, now it's terrible. And then they figure out...
What happened after Elon Musk bought this product?
Then they figure out that maybe they should have listened. But you really often don't know. You hear about a merger and you think, I wonder how that's going to impact it, but you really don't know until 6 months down the road when products are actually shifted and changed.
I'm doing a talk about, I think personally there's good investment and there's bad investment. And I think that people need to start to understand, because when you buy new technology, you need to know, do you want your company that you're going to be using to be majority owned by private equity, for example? What difference does it make if they're majority owned or minority in terms of the way that they're going to be spending and investing? What sort of private equity company are they? Do they invest? Is it a growth fund? Is it a VC? What is it? And I think, and these things make a massive difference. And the trouble with law firms is that sometimes if it's too late, you can be sitting ducks, right? Like if you're because law firms don't make, in big spaces like practice management, it's very difficult to make quick changes, in some cases, and so once, if it's quite far down the road, you might find that it takes a really long time before you can start to make a change. And I don't class Clio in this category at all. But for some, we are seeing examples in the market right now of where law firms are in a very unhappy position, and perhaps if they'd known a little more, in some cases they couldn't have done anything about it, but in some cases maybe they could.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, I agree with what Nikki and Bob said, but I also understand if people are just like,
we win.
I don't care. I don't care about this. Too many mergers. I mean, look at the airline mergers, right? I mean, who even owns whom anymore? Like, I don't even know. Like, just the other day, I was like, is US Air still around? Then I had to look it up. I'm like, oh, no, they got bought. Same with mobile companies. I mean, who even owns whom anymore? So I understand why people might just be like, I don't care. It's not my business. It's too overwhelming. But but if you're relying on a certain platform or a certain program as your lifeblood, you should know.
Isn't there like one company that makes all the eyeglasses in the world now, or something like that?
Luxottica, yeah.
All right. Well, we got all lathered up over that one a little bit.
Yeah. I got more to say, but we can move to the next topic.
Go ahead.
There are companies that even when bad situations happen, they handle it well, right? There was a practice management provider out there that was just like, we're done. And rather than spring it, because they were a big company, this was just one of their products, they actually reached out to us and we haven't told our customers yet, we want to set up a migration pathway and then announce. They don't have to go to you, but you'll be ready, right? And that's what happened, is they reached out to their customers. They're like, this just isn't our core product and we're not going to do it anymore, but here's a graceful exit. We're not going to leave you just out in the cold. That's a right way to do this for these companies. And so good and bad investment, right?
Yeah, right.
And look for the good. And it might not be the happy outcome, right? They still shut it down, but they were a good company, a good investor.
Yes.
Yep.
No.
Good point.
All right. One of the most challenging issues probably facing the legal profession, facing society as a whole, is the access to justice crisis. And we keep seeing the numbers, 80, 90% of people with legal problems are not getting adequate help for their legal problems. There is a lack of funding for direct legal services to the poor. There's a lack of technology to serve the poor. So one of the, I think, maybe hopes with generative AI is that this is a technology that does, some say, have the potential to at last make some meaningful impact on the access to justice crisis. So I want to put that to the panel and see what they think on that. And Caroline, let me start with you. Do you think that AI will make meaningful change in access to justice?
I do. I actually do. I think that there is a huge unserved need that people cannot meet, both from a resource and a cost perspective. Most people can't afford a lawyer. And what Gen AI will do, and already is starting to do, is give them tools that they can use. Okay, just the fact that it's not completely developed right now is not an argument for saying that it won't be. There's already products out there. There's already online dispute resolution tools that people are using, which were in a situation where either they would have then had nothing or would have had suffered consequences. There's all sorts of online tools in the dispute resolution space. There's quite an interesting startup in the UK called Wexler AI, which is very cool, which again in the dispute resolution space, it extracts information from your documents. It can then work out the difference between your argument and your opponent's. It can really help you. It's really incredible what it can do already. And we've already seen with some of the tools that are available in terms of automation of certain processes, so it can help people with court filings, it can help people with the things that they may struggle with and that create real difficulties for people when they don't have a lawyer. I think already we're seeing examples of where it's going to help people, and the great thing about it is that it's scalable. So I think it's really exciting. We're not there yet, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be.
We're sure not there yet, but are we going to get there? What do you think?
Absolutely not. Does it have the potential to assist with access to justice? Yes. Will it assist with access to justice? No, because capitalism is not altruistic, and we live in a capitalistic society. And so historically, there have been other platforms that have popped up that predated generative AI, LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer. These were initially created to help consumers create documents. And so consumers flocked to it because they could create these documents at a low price without hiring a lawyer. And this struck fear in the hearts of lawyers. And then these companies turned to the lawyers where they were actually going to make their money and said, do you want to become a part of this system now that we have this active consumer base? We can connect you with these consumers when they have questions. And lawyers subscribed, and then they started oftentimes they would have you can pay even more to show up at the top of search results when they're looking for a lawyer within our system. And then they also started gaming SEO because they had all sorts of content that had been created, and they'd had the money to put into SEO, and so they would show up at the top of search results if a lawyer was advertising within their platform to try to connect to these potential clients. And so at the end of the day, even though a lot of these companies act like this is access to justice and we're trying to give them more alternatives, at the end of the day, they try to just suck more money from the lawyers by instilling fear in them. And so I don't think that we're going to see anything different from that happen. The only way that we're going to have the access to justice problem solved is by governmental and regulatory requirements that force either provide money to pay people to, like LSC used to do before all its funding was cut, to represent indigent people and people that can't afford lawyers, or else it's going to have, that's really, I think, the only way that it's going to get solved. It's not going to get solved by generative AI, because we're in a capitalistic society, and people are going to use these tools to make more money, not to try to help people solve the access to justice problem. And anyone that says that's what they're doing, I always think that they're full of it, because I think that the vast majority of platforms, that's not what actually ends up happening, and I don't think it's going to with generative AI. I feel strongly about this.
I have to sadly,
We're not doing PDUM today.
Sadly, I have to agree with Nikki. I just, you see the bar associations trying to put their foot down and not allow these generative AI tools to do more to help more people, and it just seems like it's an intractable problem that's not going to go away just because we have a better tool that could work. It seems to be a notion, too, that the tool will have to be perfect before you would ever let anybody who's not a lawyer use it. And that's an unfortunate attitude, but I think we see that a lot. So I agree with you, Nick.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think anybody's arguing that generative AI is the solution to the access to justice problem. Like, nobody's thinking we've fixed it with this, but I think the inroads it is making and will continue to make, and we don't even know what's going to be out a year from now, is absolutely going to make things better than they were. And if you make it better each time, like that's wonderful. I mean, I'm not naive. I'm never like the optimist on this panel to be like, yes, everything's great now. But I just can't believe that this is not going to impact things for the better.
One concrete marginal improvement that I think is going to come out of it is it may not solve like the LSC and getting more legal aid and stuff like that, but the level, back to our earlier conversation about the number of tasks being taken off of lawyers' plates and the amount of extra time they're going to have, I think that a lot of firms are going to invest some of that extra time in pro bono work because they need to do something, and they now don't feel like they're missing out on issues. You know, they got their work done, so they're not feeling like they're missing out by having people do pro bono work.
Can I resurface my student loan forgiveness idea based on pro bono work?
Yeah.
I call it pro lono. Work 2 hours, your
And
monthly payment's
Texas
done.
federal judge has already enjoined that. Just you
thank
mentioning
you.
it has meant.
Thank you, former Chevron doctor.
I am way more cynical than that. I don't think that they're going to do that. But on the government point that Nikki raised, we're seeing in the UK, so Richard Ziskin, I interviewed him a little just at the end of last year, so it was a while ago, particularly in Gen AI terms. But one of the things that he's been talking about for years is whether AI can solve the access to justice problem, and there's been issues along the way, and he was like, we finally got there, and he's now got another new appointment. And the government, which is like at a fairly senior level, and the government are investing, and they are trying to provide platforms, and they are trying to leverage Gen AI in order to meet some of the needs of the people that currently have nothing.
Also powerful self-help tools too. It's not even just that lawyers are using it to help. It offers a more chance for really low-level matters, like basic things. All like you encounter everyone, like landlord-tenant, family law, medical bills, like the very basic things of that. So much self-help could be available through these tools.
Yeah, you can use like do not pay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's a fun callback
I
too.
do think that it will. I'm a skeptic. I don't think that it's going to necessarily make much of a dent. But I do think what it will do is for people who really don't like lawyers and don't want to talk to lawyers or don't think they have to talk to lawyers. That's a lot of people. Case in point, my mom, who's probably watching, who's going to watch this on Friday. So hi, Mom. She didn't even want to get a lawyer for her real estate closing. I had to like get one for her, and I'm like, why don't you like lawyers? And it's just like, you can't trust them. They're terrible. Like, lawyers are horrible. I'm like, well, thanks. So for people who are really looking for solutions outside of having to retain a lawyer because they're too expensive or they're too untrustworthy or they just don't think they need them, they'll probably turn to like a ChatGPT or a tool like that. But then that raises all the other issues that we've been talking about.
I think if we go back to Jack's keynote where he raised the Gartner hype cycle, right? This is where this argument really comes down to. There are going to be some people who think if we just throw ChatGPT at it, suddenly the problem will be solved. It's like a grenade, basically. And so missing child support, go to Garnishment PT, and we'll get the solution for you. And that is clearly a woefully inadequate approach to dealing with those types of issues. But as we go through that hype cycle and we start to see the productivity gains, it could be you're having a child support issue, you don't know how to get help because all of our services are in English and that's not your native language. Suddenly AI can translate that for you, right? And that's a lift in access to justice. And so it's not throwing ChatGPT as a solution, but how can we use the solutions we have with ChatGPT? That's where I think we're going to see access to justice improve. But there's going to be a whole lot of that other garbage out there that I think we as a profession need to try and prevent as much as possible.
And actually, to Steve's point about not being perfect, right? Really interestingly, in terms of if it's somebody's own personal case, right? When they check, it's a really good starting point. And actually, when they go through and check the facts. If there are errors, who's going to know it better than the person involved, right? What it does is it gives you this really great, you know, rather than them starting with nothing, they can go through. And if there's something wrong, they're going to spot it. It's almost like they're more likely to spot it than a lawyer in some ways, because a lot of this stuff will be personal. So if it's come up with something, you know, that they'll be like, hey, that doesn't sound right, get rid of that, right? So in some ways, they're even in a better position, particularly now in these early days when it may not be perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
Even little things like chatbots on court websites where somebody can just ask, like, what is the filing fee? How do I do this? Rather than having the most basic thing thrown out because you couldn't parse through the archaic rules and figure it out. Even that, it doesn't have to be a grand application of it. Little things like that can really help too.
And
I
it's
think
the
one
little
of the
things
key
that matter.
points, just make one point. One of the things I've written about that I think is really relevant to this issue is there's the justice gap, and there's also a legal tech funding gap, and that there's very little money being invested in developing technology to serve either pro se litigants or low-income litigants. The Legal Services Corporation has an annual grant program to create technology to serve, you know, the people served by legal services offices. The entire funding for that program is $5 million. $900 million for Clio, $5 million for low-income people. I mean, that's the way that the market is right now, and so there needs to somehow be a reallocation of some of this investment money into developing tech for this sector for it to happen. But I do ultimately agree with Stephanie's original point, which is that this will make an impact. It's going to be incremental. But if you go to the Legal Services does an annual conference every year called the Innovations in Technology Conference, where you see the tech that's being developed and built to serve low-income people, the legal needs of low-income people. There's a lot going on, a lot of use of generative AI already, but it's incremental. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to make progress on it.
I think also we can't forget that to adequately serve many of these people, it's not just an ability to access legal information, it's access. I mean, there are a lot of people in this world that don't have any access to even get to the information, nor do they even know what questions to ask. And so just because we have generative AI, which is a great tool, can do all this, we can't just safely assume that, oh, everybody's going to run out and use it, because some people can't and they don't know how to. And that is a more intractable problem that we have to face as a society, I think.
We're very low on time. We had one other issue we wanted to touch on real quick, maybe, if we want to run, we can run, or we can
Speed
do a
run?
P-Doom, or we can do P-Doom.
Yeah, whatever. Whichever you
do
want to do.
So
So you need to explain to the audience what that is.
I think Nikki needs to explain what that is. Didn't you start us on the P-Doom? The P-Doom route.
P-Doom is this idea of how close we are to our ultimate destruction, and that AI has significantly, exponentially advanced us along the way. And so to close out the show, we all give a number that indicates how we're feeling about the state of affairs in the world and how close we are to the apocalypse.
So 100 is we're like dead tomorrow
dead.
or dead in a few minutes, and 0 is life is great, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like P with doom in parentheses, like probability of doom, if you're a math
Probability
nerd
of
out there.
doom.
There we
Yeah.
go. That was good.
Right. So, Steve, what's our probability of doom this week?
Well, I went to the keynote this morning, and like some of you,
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, anybody go and see
having
Nita?
listened to that and knowing that my mind is going to be soon be read by everybody and will it'll be mush, I think it's pretty high. I'd say about 75 or 80.
Yeah, that keynote kind of freaked me out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. And I thought it was way too optimistic. Like, oh, we'll put guide rules in place and we'll have regulations. I'm like, when has that ever happened?
Like we've done so well so
yeah,
far.
tech always is always out ahead of the law. Yeah, I'm going to go with 65.
Yeah, I'm also feeling kind of pessimistic. I don't know, like this conference has been great, so I don't know what I'm feeling so pessimistic about. I think the access to justice thing just made me really angry, and I'm mad at capitalism. So I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna say I'm like at probably about an 80. I'm gonna give it an 80.
That's high.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is this half of the aisle any more optimistic about our chances for survival? Or Joshua, go ahead.
So I'm going to put myself at a 10. There are 3 reasons for that. One, oh my God, we're almost at the end of ClioCon, and I'm really excited for that because it has been a long, hard road to get here. So that makes me really happy. 2, Jack's Duo demo was just freaking phenomenal. And I think it really shows that you can work with AI, and we don't have to worry that we'll be replaced by AI in like every instance. So I
And then
love
you can
that a
live
lot.
demo a product without it crashing. That's
Yeah, and we can live demo a product without it crashing,
reason
which
for
is
optimism enough.
a real tech company concern. And the last one is I am an optimist when it comes to the impact of law. Like, law is the only thing outside of the law of physics that we can do to control our world. Andreessen Horowitz famously said, software is eating the world. Well, law is the big fish that eats software. And so if you think social media is bad, let's find a reasonable way to regulate it. If you think scanning our brainwaves is bad, let's create a regulation. We don't have to give in to big tech. We can regulate it for the greater good. So,
And a federal judge just enjoined that idea, too.
So big government will save us from big tech.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm always on the lower end of PDUM, I think. I'm probably around a 15, and I'm feeling pretty good right now, especially if it's about AI ending the world. Like, if there's plenty of other things out there in the world that are way more hairy, like Jack's face, that are going to cause doom far earlier than AI will.
Yeah, I'm probably like a 25 or 25. I'm fairly optimistic. I am concerned about I keep going back to the judges and joining things. A lot of these good ideas to fight back against the tech doom are being blocked in ways that kind of prevent the law from eating that stuff. So that worries me a little bit. But I'm on the plus side. Jack's beard makes me feel good, so I'm going to go there.
I'm just going to be real quick because there's no time left. So I'm just going to say I'm really low, probably like 10, 15. I think that Stephanie used the word cockroaches for the billable hour. I'd say the legal sector as a whole is a bit like a cockroach. I think that we're gonna make money regardless. We're going to carry on regardless. I'm feeling quite good about this.
Okay, this is the positive half.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm sitting here thinking about global warming causing all sorts of weather wreaking havoc all over the world.
Yeah.
Global affairs in a mess. Our internal our national politics here a mess. And yet I'm feeling kind of optimistic today. I don't know why. So I'm like we got through the panel, so that's good, you know. So I'm like a 20 or something. So I think that's good.
Yeah,
we'll go with. I don't know if we can average it out and come up with an overall PDUM score, but we'll need some generative AI to do that. Well, a huge thanks to everybody at Clio for making this happen. It's been a lot of fun to be able to do it live. And like I say, if you want to catch us on a weekly basis, every Friday, not this Friday because we're going to use this one, but you can go to youtube.com @Legaltech Week, and there's the information on how to sign up for our weekly show, or you can watch the recordings there. Thanks to you guys all. Thanks.